It's me, Capri. My mommy is the best. Super mom, love you much. She helps mommy get their smiles back, their giggles back, and their sparkle back. You wait for the show. Brush. Get ready for It's Super Slowly and Super Strong.
Welcome to Healing for the Soul podcast, sponsored by Supermom Robin Stoltman, where every week I feature different guests to empower you to become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or even thought of. If you are ever looking for a virtual assistant, I highly recommend Sphere Rocket to delegate any business-related tasks like grow your social medias, book appointments, and much more that all businesses require, boosting your sales, productivity, and much more. The link to Sphere Rocket is at the bottom of this episode. And this is episode in season 6, episode number 34. And today I have my guest, Rosemary Olander, who
Correct.
for over 20 years has partnered with school districts across New York State to strengthen parent-school relationships, implement proactive behavioral support systems, and support educators through personal and professional development and mentoring. In 2010, she was a primary author of The School-Home Connection, Forging Positive Relationships with Parents, through the Corwin Publishing, to help parents and teachers connect in meaningful, authentic ways, building trust, fostering collaboration, and supporting the success and the well-being of every student. So let's find out more, as today we are talking about put your wallets away and raise rich children. Thank you so much, Rosemary, for being here today.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
Well, same here, and so I'm hoping I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you said it correctly. It's Olender.
Perfect. Well, that always helps. I never like having that happen, you know? It's one of those things you don't always know.
Right.
When
Right.
meeting new people. So.
Okay, so let me start by talking about how my latest book came about. In April of this year, I published a book called Coffee and Wisdom, A Father's Legacy to Leading a Rich Life. That came about as a result of a conversation I had with my dad the night before he passed away. We were in the hospital. We knew it was a matter probably of days. We didn't realize it was a matter of hours. But he said to me, as I was sitting there, I want to apologize to you and your sister for leaving you with nothing. And I was confused, and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, we don't have a bank account to speak of. We don't own the house. My car is a used older car. I'm leaving you with nothing. That prompted me to have a lengthy discussion with him, more of a me talking, his listening. And I said, do you not realize that Tony and I, my sister and I, won the lottery the day we were born to you and Mom? You have given us more gifts in a lifetime that have made us so rich. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. So I explained. As a result of that conversation, I jotted down notes and I started to observe and watch my behavior, my kids, my life, reflect on it. And then when COVID hit, I said, it's time to write the book. So I wrote this book, which is a change in mindset for parents. As an educator of over 40 years and working with parent groups and working with teachers and counselors, I realized that there's a real mindset out there that you have to have money to make your kids happy and so that they can be successful adults. And a lot of families that didn't have that kind of money were feeling very much at a disadvantage and feeling like they couldn't do it. They couldn't ever catch up, and they weren't giving their kids what their kids needed. So this book became sort of a cornerstone. A lot of people who have read it have said, you need to go out and talk to parents about this, because my parents felt that way. And you know, it would have been nice to have done and seen some of the things you're talking about. So the book is basically about 12 gifts There are more, but I picked the top 12 that I thought were responsible for making me successful professionally and personally. There are things like the gift, we all know about the gift of love and acceptance. Everybody knows that. But the greatest gift my father gave us was his presence. He didn't just spend time with us. He spent quality time listening and talking and communicating with and paying attention to us all the time. There was nothing that got past him. Even stuff that I did out of the house because he owned a small business, people would stop and talk to him about seeing me. And when I would get home, he'd say, "Hey, I know you went to so-and-so's house today. What'd you do?" I mean, he always was aware, always. The gift of humor was another one. The gift of honesty and trust. The gift of ethics and integrity. Rituals, traditions, routines. Rituals, traditions, and routines are key for children to feel grounded, to feel like they belong very positively to a group. And that is so important. So in the book, each chapter explores one gift. There are 12 chapters. And it explains why that gift is so important to the emotional stability and resilience of a child, why it's so important. And then there are reflections of all the things my reflections of all the things my father did and said that showed me that gift. And then the third piece of the chapter is suggestions for parents. Here are some ideas. If you're probably already doing a lot of them, but here are some you may not have thought of. And then there are more you can think of. In the back of the book, there's sort of like a journal that says, okay, what am I already doing for this, for each chapter? What might I try? Okay. You see, my father, from the time I was a little girl, sat with me every night. He would say, "You want a glass of milk and some cookies?" And we'd sit down and talk. And he would spend quality talk time with me. When I was little, it was probably 15, 20 minutes, maybe. By the time I got to middle school, I was drinking coffee with him and having cookies and crackers. And we would talk for an hour, 2 hours sometimes, until my mother would say, "Hey, you guys got to get to bed. She's got school, you got work, get to bed." But we talked, and that's where the title Coffee and Wisdom came from. Because we would always chat about, he would always start the conversation with, "How was your day? What happened today that really made you excited and happy? Was there anything? Was there anything that upset you? Why? Why did it upset you? Let's talk about that. What could you have done?" So that's the kind of consistent communication that led to the trust between us and the closeness between us.
I like that because that's some of the questions that I was thinking as you were speaking. Literally, like one of them is like when you talked about for the different chapters, there's 12 of them you said in your book. And
Yes.
then one of them you said about how the rituals and the routines. I was thinking, like, how did your dad teach you to view chores then? Like,
well,
that's
okay.
what I'm assuming is one of those, because that's part of being a household. And like my kids, they even have their own job to do. Like when we're going to eat, like each child has their own specific job of what they're doing.
That's a ritual. One of our rituals was my mother was the cook. My father could make coffee. That was it. He couldn't boil plain water, but he could make coffee. And so one of the rituals we had was he and I would clean the kitchen. My mother was done once she cooked. And then my father would either wash the dishes and I would dry and put them away, or I would wash and he would dry and put them away. But the kitchen got cleaned. And that was a ritual that we had. Obviously we had the ritual of sitting down and chatting every night over coffee and crackers or cookies or whatever. That was a ritual. Another ritual we had to show the importance of family is we would have, I'm Italian and Catholic, and we had the Italian 7 fishes ritual or tradition in Italian families is that on Christmas Eve, it is a day you have to fast from meat. You cannot eat any meat. You can only eat fish. Well, the Italians do this 7 fishes dinner, which is based on the 7 something in the Bible, and I'm losing the name right now. But anyway, the point is we cook 7 different kinds of fishes, and that's a meal, and the whole family is there. And I mean, the whole family is there. My father said, I don't care where you choose to live when you're an adult. You can get married, you can go live in Japan, for all I care. It's up to you. Christmas Eve, you are home in this house. So you figure out all year how you're going to get the money to get back here. But Christmas Eve, you're in this house. And I said to him, why? Why it's just one night? And he goes, it is one night, but it is a family tradition that puts us all together. And the reality is, we don't know who will not be sitting at the table anymore a year from now. That's why you come home. And that has led me to start traditions in my own family that I won't break, because everybody counts on it. And that was the thing. Everybody counted on that. And then we brought friends in who wanted to be part of it. And I still do it to this day, even though most of my family is gone. To this day, we still have about 20 people for Christmas Eve dinner and invite them in.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, it could be a little ritual, like in the morning when you're having your coffee and your kid comes into the kitchen, you ask 2 or 3 questions, or you ask them, tomorrow morning, I want you to ask me a question. It's just establishing a grounding point for the children so that they know they belong and they matter. And what they say matters, what they're asking. What parents need to realize is they're their child's teacher for sure, but their children are their teachers as well if they listen and they pay attention well enough. You need to be an active listener, right? And you need to listen, especially when it's almost nonsensical and they're little, mommy, 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 and they're talking about something. Because if you don't listen to them about the little things in their life, when they get older, they're not going to tell you the big things that are important and you need to know. It never occurred to me to not tell my father something, regardless of how bad it was. Never occurred to me not to tell him. And when I later had friends who said, don't tell your parents, or a boyfriend who said, you can't tell your father this, I would say, whoa, stop. There's no subject that's verboten between my parents and I. We talk to each other. So again, it's important in those rituals and those traditions, and the tradition of doing that, of communicating, can only happen if the kids feel like they're part of a bigger thing and they're an integral and important part of it, regardless of how old they are. It holds for little kids too.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that one too. I love that, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how it's those little things that add up. And like, I'm even thinking like with my husband and I, like we tell each other everything, to a certain extent. If I've got clients that can't, then, but outside of that, I'm like, well, we talk about everything. And I think that's really what develops that closer relationship, even in a marriage. Because I'm like, it does not apply just to children. It applies to like those that you're closest to, like your spouse.
Right. Well, it's a matter of trust.
Wow. Yeah,
and it's a matter of trust.
Build that foundation.
Right. If you withhold information, or the information is going to get out sooner or later anyway. And if you withhold information, then people feel like they can't trust you. I'm almost too transparent sometimes, but I want people to know who I am and, who they're dealing with. And I'm not going to hide that. That's, really important. I had a friend one time who told me that when his wife and he had an agreement that if they were ever approached or got hit on by the opposite sex, their response would be, let me go home and talk to my spouse about that. And if they say, okay, I'll get back to you.
I like that.
And
That's a good
yeah,
way to
it was the
handle it.
perfect response because it's like there is nothing. And as I grew up with my father, like every kid, I tried to do end runs around him, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna go to this dance tonight." Blah 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 blah. What'd your mother say? He would say, and I could never say, "Mom said okay," because if I did that and tried to do an end run, he'd say, "Well, let me talk to your mother, and then I'll get back to you." So they were always on the same page, even if they didn't agree. Whatever one of them felt strongly about, that was what was going to happen. They decided we're going to be on the same page. I had another friend who said whose father said to her, "Look, I married your mother. I had you. You're going to grow up and go away. I'm going to be with this woman the rest of my life. So my loyalty's to her first."
I like that one
joking,
even better.
jokingly, and it's true. But so you want to be on the same page, and everybody wants to be perfectly transparent in the family. That's not to say you don't hide little things that might hurt them or whatever, but as long as it's not going to hurt you or anybody else, what the heck.
Well, yeah, and I like that though at the same time because I'm like, yeah, the loyalty is the one that you're married to because yeah, the children aren't gonna leave and it's gonna. I'm not looking forward to that. Thank God I got a lot of years yet before that one happens. I
Yeah.
already know I'm not gonna do well with empty nesting. I already know that part. But
Maybe by that time you'll be okay with it though. As long as again
true,
they're coming back. I mean, we are
yeah.
fortunate. My husband and I have been married 56 years, and we are fortunate enough to have all three of our children and grandchildren within 10 miles of our house. The reason for that is because they have chosen to do that. We have not demanded that, but they each in their own way, for their own reasons, have made the decision. We kind of like this family hub, and we still, when I do Sunday dinner and people come over, there's 12 of us. It's a big family. And now
Awesome.
we've got my granddaughter's roommate, and my daughter has sort of semi brought in a young man who was kind of disowned by his family. So we've got another member. So, you have all of that, and you want to establish that community of support for your kids. Parents need to realize they can't do it all. And they can't be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. That was another thing in the chapter. One of the chapters I talk about my father feeling that there's no failure, that when something doesn't work, you learn from it. As long as you learn from it, it's not a mistake. It's just a learning experience. So figure out what you did wrong, why you did what you did, and do it differently next time, so that it can be you can be successful with it. He had a great sense of humor, and that was one of the gifts he gave us was the gift of humor. I mean, he could take the worst situation and just stand back and change his perspective a little bit and say, well, let's look at it this way. And then I'd say, but this is nothing to laugh at. But I mean, there's a couple stories in the book. There's one story in the book with my uncle who bought a new car, a brand new car, and it got dirty and he wanted to wash it. But the city had imposed a water rationing system and he couldn't wash his car. So my father said, no problem. Let's just take the car down to the river. We'll use buckets and we'll wash it. So they take the car down to the river, and my uncle backs it down towards the river, forgets to put the emergency brake on. In those days, that was deadly. So the car rolls into the back end, the back two wheels roll into the water. My uncle starts yelling. My father's laughing so hard he could barely stand up. And that made my uncle even madder. And the more my father laughed, finally got my uncle laughing. And my uncle's like, why are you laughing? And he's like, we'll get a tow truck. It's not a big deal, but it's hysterical. Look at this, I mean, they didn't lose the car. That would have been different. But I mean, when I would come home upset about something, he'd say, well, let's look at it. Let's take it apart. Why did it happen? What could you have done differently? What'd you learn from it? Well, you walk away better for it. So, but yeah, he had a great sense of humor.
Well, yeah, especially with the vehicle, that's a great example. You would have to have a good sense of humor, but then also thinking of how to do it differently. Like you said, going down to the river instead of taking like, okay, well, I can't wash the car,
Yeah.
and being mad
Yeah.
about it, doing it differently.
See, I think what's missing is in our society today, in the world today, is people are not spending enough time critically thinking. They take things on face value and it's either black or white, and they don't think about all of the things in between and how to analyze it and how to take it apart and maybe look at it from a different perspective. In the chapter on perspective, one of the things my father taught us was that empathy is important. It's critical, and it's terribly missing today in our world, and we need more of it. Not just sympathy where you get what's happening to somebody, but empathy where you feel it in your gut as you're watching it. But my father would say to me, look, we don't know where that person who just did the thing that upset us has just come from. Imagine if we had ticker tapes on our forehead that told us where that person had come from. And the tape said something like, I just found out I have cancer. Or I just found out that, my dog died this morning. That kind of thing. I had a teacher one time walk into a classroom and kick a garbage can across the room. First thing he did. Got us all to attention, of course. And he was grumpy, grumpy, grumpy the whole class. And I went home and told my father about that. And he said, well, what do you think? What do you think could have happened to him during, there's a million things that could have happened to him before he went to school that day. You don't know, so that always makes me think when I'm watching and observing people, what could be there in the background that they can't overcome right now, so the gift of perspective is so important. And even people will say, well, little kids can't. Yeah, they can. Little kids can understand. Like I remember when my son was 3 years old and he bit his cousin. We were just walking down a hallway and he just he didn't break the skin, thank God. But I just said to him, I want you to think about how you made him feel. And why would you do that? And he had explained that his cousin had hit him, 5 minutes before, and I didn't see that. And I said, okay, what could you have done differently? You could have said, Mom, he hit me. So we talked about that. But again, it's a matter of get your kids to think through the event. Tell them, be the camera. Tell me what happened. Just be a camera. What happened? Show me what happened. And then talk about it. Take it apart. We don't do enough of that in our own life. We really need to do it with our kids.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you. I know there's a lot of people that I do that with my kids. I'm asking them questions, one of them this morning, why was he upset? And it's well, he was cold. So I'm okay, well, I can't fix it if you don't tell me. So that was one of the things that I did this morning. I'm thank you for telling me. So I was able to fix it.
Absolutely.
But you're talking about the exact same thing, is that if we're not finding out, why is the person crying? Like you said it for the example for being bit. Well, earlier he got hit. So that makes sense to us, why he did that. But we don't know, hey, did you just bite just a bite? And then the answer was no, because like you said, he had gotten hit earlier by the cousin there.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of parents will feel like they don't have the time to have those conversations with their kids. And we know we're very busy, and you know how busy you are with your kids and all the things you're doing. But the reality is you don't need to block out a half hour or an hour like my dad was able to do. You don't need to do that. You can take the 10 minutes from the door to the school bus, and you can say, In school today, while you're there, I want you to think about 3 things that you want to come home and tell me. That's all. And then something that will start a conversation. And then when they walk in the door, did you think about it? Now, a lot of times they're going to say, no, I forgot. Okay, well, let's talk about your day. That kind of thing. But again, what you're saying is, you're important to me even when you're not with me. That's what you're really saying to them. What happens to you is important to me. You are important to me. It's unconditional love. Now, when they do something bad, do something that you don't approve of, a behavior that you don't approve of, then you do the same exact thing. Talk to me calmly. Talk to me. Tell me why. Why did you throw your milk on the floor? Let's just use that as an example. Why did you throw your milk on the floor? Did you not like? I don't know. And that's a great response from kids. I don't know. Okay, well, let's talk about that. I mean, my father made me crazy because he wouldn't let me off the hook that way. If I would say, I don't know, and he'd say, well, let's talk about it so that you can figure it out so it doesn't happen again. So we would talk about, okay, was it, let me offer some ideas and you tell me yes or no. Was the milk spoiled? Was it too warm? Was it too cold? Do you not like milk and you don't want to drink milk anymore? That kind of thing. I think what's key, and the key theme I try to show in the book through the reflections, is that very small moments that are ordinary things can turn into extraordinary moments, that are tipping points that lead to other things or not, that can make you truly happy or realize, wow, that was a key statement my kid made to me, and that gives me information I didn't have before, that kind of thing. We recently were on vacation, and I realized that look for those ordinary moments that become extraordinary. We were in France and Portugal, and one of the things I noticed in France, when we were on the street and when we were in small towns, is that they buy a lot of bread, they buy a lot of baguettes. And we were in the farmer's market at one point, and I noticed that French women, the moms, always let their children break a piece of the bread off and eat it after they buy it. The kids really want it, and they say, oh yeah. So they're all they never say, no, you have to wait till we get home. The joy on those kids' faces, plus the fact that they weren't hungry and whining because they were hungry or wanted to get home, what's the big deal? And my friend said to me, because we were with her sister who was French, that basically, you always buy an extra baguette because you know that one's going to get eaten by the time you get home. It'll spoil your dinner. How many times do we see that? And what you can say is you can have some, but you have to eat your dinner. If you don't, then the next time you can't have one. With kids, you give them 2 choices. One you want, one they don't. Okay, does that make sense? So you always get what you want, what you want them to do. And so you say, hey, that's the way it is. But we watch that. I just got such joy watching those kids' faces. And another thing that happened to us was we were going into the d'Orsay Museum, and we had an extra ticket because one of our group was sick and couldn't come. And my friend's sister took that extra ticket, and it's time stamped. So it was the time for us to go in. And she went down the line and found a young man who was all by himself. And she said, are you all by yourself? And he said, yes. And she said, would you like a ticket to get in right now? Because he was in line to buy tickets for later. He said, oh, I'd love to. How much? And she said, no cost. You can have it. And she gave it to him. The joy on that man's face, and he brightened up and he walked stronger and he walked faster, was so soothing to my heart. And I thought, well, there's one of those little moments that doesn't mean much to most people. To him, it meant the world. To my sister's friend, she was happy she found something. And to me, it was just a joy watching somebody be so happy. So those are the kinds of things you want to find with your children when they do stuff that say, wow, I was so happy to see you spend that kind of focus on your homework or whatever. Just find it, observe, and actively listen to them.
I love all the tips that you're giving, especially like with this last tip about being able to find those little moments, because it means the world to someone else. That's the receiving end of it as well. So where would people to get in contact with you? What is the best way for people to get in contact with you, and then also be able to get your book as well?
Okay, well, my book is available on Amazon. It's also available at Xlibris, Xlibris.com. That's my publisher. And they print it so you can get it a little faster if you go directly to them, xlibris.com. I am on LinkedIn. They can put my name in. They can actually go to my website, which is rosemaryolander.com, and they'll get my book website, which will give them the links to purchase the book if they want, and my first book as well, the first book of Forging Positive Relationships with Parents, which was a real boon to figuring out what was causing problems between homes and schools, and saying, okay, let's not do these things. It was basically written for school teachers and administrators to say, if you do these things, you're going to have problems. If you do these other things, you'll have better relationships with parents. But it's a good book for parents to read, to just say, okay, let me understand why I have such animosity towards my kid's teacher or district or whatever, and there are certain indicators. There are certain definite indicators that there's going to be a problem between school and home. So they can go there. They can go to Amazon. You can order it through Barnes.
I appreciate it. So I just want to remind everybody to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Healing for the Soul podcast, and keep coming back for more episodes. Thank you for your time and your energy while listening to today's episode of Healing for the Soul podcast.
That's all for now, folks. Thanks for listening. Thank you for fun. Tap that follow button. Subscribe. Quack, quack. Bye-bye. Well, next time. Now you got it.